Welcome, everybody. This is Arnie Greenland. I'm the moderator for this webinar. I'm a member of the Board of Practice section and also a professor of practice at University of Maryland. Our speaker today, we're very happy to have Steve Sashihara as our speaker, and I'm going to say a little bit more about him in a moment. But first, I want to do a little commercial for practice section. As the slide I have up on the screen talks about what the purpose, which you can read quickly up there, of the section is. But we do a lot of very important activities for Informs, including running the Edelman, Wagner, and Smith prizes. And it just so happens that our speaker today, his company, is currently a finalist in the Edelman for this year, and was a finalist in last year's Wagner. So very much in their organization, very much involved in what goes on at Inform. But we also sponsor two webinars, Applied Analytics Success Stories, and the next one, which was actually rescheduled from last month to next week, January 28th at noon, a week from today. You can see the speaker and title. And then the next one for this series, Sustaining Outstanding Analytics Organization, has not yet been determined. We also have a monthly virtual networking hour, and that one is also next Friday. And the place to register is up on the screen. So I want to move on to saying a few words about our speaker, Steve Sashihara, CEO of Princeton Consultants. Steve is founder and CEO of the company, one of the world's largest leading experts in AI. Founded 42 years ago, and has grown into a very preeminent consultancy. He's been co-chair of the Association of Management Consulting Firms, an officer of Informs Roundtable, an organization I was a member of for many years. And leading organization, this is a leading organization of analytics and operations research professionals. Steve is a graduate of Princeton and is also a member of their advisory board, the Department of Operations Research and Financial Engineering. And I'll say more about this last point, author of a really well-known and well-regarded book, The Optimization Edge, an executive-friendly explanation of how optimization is a powerful application for AI to drive their business results. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Steve, who will spend about the next 20 minutes talking about their organization.
Hey, thanks, Arnie. Okay, let me see if I can get screen share to work. This is only my 400,000th screen share of the pandemic, and still I'm struggling to figure out what the button is.
It's the green one at the bottom.
Let's see. I don't see. Oh,
sometimes you have to put the cursor on the screen to see it.
I'm still not seeing it. Oh, wait. Yep, share screen here. Awesome. Look good?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. My talk is called the Princeton 20 for reasons that will be clear earlier, and I'm going to buzz through this. Thank you, Arnie, and I also want to, acknowledge my debt and admiration for Informs, and because Arnie already pitched my book, I will not go further. But I just want to say that the intent of the book was to basically popularize our stuff for business executives. And so if you're looking for something with the latest techniques, formula and algorithms, there are none of that in this. This is more about storytelling and trying to explain to an executive what optimization is. A little about our firm. We're called Princeton Consultants. We have two corporate offices, one in Princeton, New Jersey, and one about an hour north in New York City. We basically manage clients in multiple industries. For example, consumer, e-commerce, media, financial service, healthcare, sports, and life sciences. We have a special deep expertise in supply chain and transportation, including railroads, over-the-road carriers, air, and ocean. Basically, we've been in business for 42 years and have done 1,800 successful projects. Our senior staff, which is our top 28 consultants, average about 15 years. And the firm leadership, which are 6 directors, average 20 years of experience. And our mission is to help our clients transform their business through AI and optimization. These are basically our 3 practice services. One is that we will help build and deliver systems for the full life cycle, which is really about this talk. The second is we are occasionally called in to examine someone else's model and give advice. And the third is we also work with in-house groups. For convenience, we're calling these advanced analytics groups, but in most of the organizations we work with, they have a wide variety of names: operations research, data science, advanced analytics, and others. But our mission in the third group is to help take some of the best practices that we've seen and help in-house organizations. And that was one of the motivations of this talk. Before I get started, I just want to do a couple definitional slides. We choose to use the term advanced analytics as a broad category, artificial intelligence as a subcategory of that, and optimization as a part of AI. So we think that all optimization is AI, but not all artificial intelligence is optimization. One way that in the book that we talk about, and I've talked about what optimization is as a practical matter, is I start by saying, think as a business executive, you have various assets. I put these in the air quotes to say, I don't mean assets in the GAAP or accounting sense, but assets sort of in the English sense of something of value that you have some control over. So your people don't appear on your balance sheet, but your clients, your employees, they are assets of your firm. So you're making various decisions about your assets, and not necessarily, in fact, not often just one decision. It's often a combination. So you're not only scheduling, but you're doing an assignment / scheduling decision, or a pricing / assignment decision. And so basically what optimization is trying to do is help you make a series of decisions on your asset classes, and the outcomes you're trying to achieve are increased efficiency, effectiveness, nimbleness, consistency, and profitability. Would love to spend more time on this slide, but in the interest of buzzing through, I'm just trying to set the table a little bit. But let me just do a U-turn for those of you who, everyone on this call is a practitioner, you're in the choir. So let me just kind of do a 180 on this. So let me ask, if AI optimization is such a fantastic no-brainer, why isn't everyone already using it? Schedule optimization has been around since the 1950s. It's true that it's only in the last 10 years that everyone's talking AI, but the core technologies have been around for quite a while. Yes, they've gotten remarkably better recently, but if you could, since the 50s, produce a mathematically perfect schedule, in other words, if you could take this magic pill and get superpowers, why isn't everyone doing that today? I'll give you a couple examples, kind of negative examples. We have a healthcare client that has over 1,000 healthcare facilities that schedule their patients using Excel by hand. They do not use optimization. We hope they will when we're done with them, but that's the stats. And this is a very, very successful, a large healthcare organization full of scientists and engineers. So if this stuff is such a no-brainer, why aren't they using it? And the US Census up until 2010 was asking hundreds of thousands of field personnel to self-schedule and route themselves, despite the fact that we have decades of vehicle routing and traveling salesman algorithms to lord on them. So the quick purpose of this slide is to ask, if this optimization stuff is such a fantastic boon, if we can prove mathematical perfection, why isn't everyone using it? And the answer, in our opinion, is because it looks more like this. It's not a magic pill that suddenly you're thin and healthy and beautiful. It's more like this. It's something that you have to work hard at to see progress. It takes a lot of hard work. Here's a slide that basically shows our view of what's missing between the proof of concept and the outcomes. It's this implementation area in the center. If I could dive into a little bit more detail, the first part of the journey of the AI lifecycle starts with discovery. That's the business problem, a bunch of data and algorithms, and then findings. Frankly, if you're in academia, this is your world. and it's a good world. But I would also say most of the materials that you'll be reading that are academic or in journal basically begin and end with this slide. So what we're talking about today is what goes after this slide. So I have almost nothing to say about this first very important step of discovery, but it's all about after the discovery is made, and we'll call that deployment. So deployment is basically saying, taking this discovery, we have to validate the original finding, we have to do a product construction, and then we have to install into the field. So that's deployment. So deployment really is what immediately drives the outcomes. If it's not deployed in the real world, it might get some academic awards, but it doesn't actually do anything for corporate performance or bottom line. So if this is, and I'm saying this is the hard work, not to say that discovery isn't hard work, but this is really hard work. This is the, okay, now I know I should do these exercises and I should eat these foods. Now it's the hard work of actually doing it, of grinding it out on the exercise machine. Hopefully what I hope this talk will be is something like professional trainer who's going to say, let me take some of my experience and help you. So that's all the table saying for my talk. This talk is going to talk about 20 different risk factors. If I spent 5 minutes on each risk factor, it would be the full hour would just be on that. And Arnie said, hey, really compress this down. In fact, about halfway through the 20 minutes that we were given just to talk, we want to do some questions and answers. So with your permission, I'm just going to buzz through these really fast. This will be recorded for your later inspection. And if you reach out to Arnie Uniforms, we're making the PDF available for anyone that really wants it. But so I'm just going to touch on these really briefly and certainly not going to cover them. I'll start with the first one at a little bit slower speed, just so you get the idea of them. But basically what we have when we go into a project, we basically take every project that we're about to do and we score it on these 10 risk factors. The way we score it is that we say it's either a high risk, which we say is a +1, it's neutral, or it's actually a strength, a -1. So that we don't have any deep scoring. It's just yes, no, neutral. One thing we do is before we accept the project, while we're still talking with the clients, maybe they're in discussion with other competing companies to us, we will very openly say, here's what we view as the risks of this project. Do you agree these are risks? Here are some things that we think could help us mitigate those risks. Here are things that we think are really driving some win at our sales, some things that are actually success factors that are really helping. And we find that often if we get alignment with a potential client, that they'll say, okay, I really like the way you're looking at this, and therefore we're much more inclined to hire you. Occasionally they'll just clash with us and they'll say, boy, you're so negative. Maybe you guys aren't the right people. You don't really understand what we're trying to accomplish here. And so this is a nice way, not unlike dating, it's a nice way to make sure that it's a good compatible mix. It doesn't mean that one's good and one's bad. It just means maybe we're not compatible if we don't see this project the same way. Internally, we use these risk factors to do our staff assignments. We try to create teams that explicitly seek expertise for areas that we think are of high risk. After the projects are done, this is how we do our staff performance reviews. We don't say what the outcome of the project was. We say, how well did we overcome the risks? We also do what are called after action reviews, where we look at the project based on what we scored the risk initially. And we also use this to take learnings from the projects and put them in our intellectual property repositories. So we've divided the risk factors into 10 what we call environmental factors. We used to call them business factors, but we're now calling them environmental factors, and 10 technical factors. And like I said, I'll start with one and I'll buzz through all 20, but I'm going to be real fast on this with my apologies. So I have 20 slides and each look like this. The top is basically how we score these things. And I want to just say, this is based on 40 years of Princeton Consultants doing work. This is not any argument that these are in some absolute sense the way to think with risk. This is just the way we see things, what we've seen. And you call an in-house group differently when you call an outside group. So often when we're called in, the default, this blue, the default is that the company or the unit that we're working for is underperforming or is in some kind of trouble. That is what is normal for us. If they are a startup or a brand new business, that is considered a risk factor for us, meaning it's a more normal, it's a higher risk than normal. And in fact, if they're successful in growing, which is certainly describes a lot of our clients, then that's actually a negative risk or a success factor. And it's just to stop right now, and I won't be able to do this on the other 19, but why should this matter? If the company is successful in growing, there's a feeling of prosperity. Everyone's saying, "Yeah, let's keep doing what we're doing, just do more of it." If it's consolidating or underperforming, there can be, and there often is, a sense of worry that are these outsiders here to is what they're telling us what they're really here for? Are they looking for people to fire or lay off or replace with robots, or what are they really here to do? So in an environment where things are consolidated or underperforming, people, it's hard to work with the organization, and you have to just be very careful of it. In a startup or new business, however, that's the hardest because they're immature, and it's like working with a very talented youngster. A lot of what they need to be functional are things that they're still working out. So I'm not saying that red means bad and green means good. I'm saying red means risk. And so you can harness that as energy, and you can perform it. We have on each of these slides, I've also have a list with probably only value for our in-house people, but we have a lot of what we call mitigators. And just do this format of PowerPoint, I've just listed like 3 on every slide. Some of these things we have dozens, some we only have a few. But once again, given this format, I'm not going to indulge in trying to explain what these are. But in our shop, these have meanings. So basically, when we assess for a project that we think that one of these factors is a high risk, then we'll start talking about, okay, what mitigators do you think are appropriate here? So let me just keep going. So is a sponsoring business consolidating, growing, or are they a brand new business? How about the executive? So sometimes people talk in our business glibly about the client, and they conflate the company that's hiring them and the individual executive that's sponsoring them. So the sponsoring executive, are they a senior manager for the line of business that we're going to be automating? Are they the general manager? Or actually, are they in some other support function that isn't the line of business, say R&D, IT, et cetera? So if they are not in the line of business that are actually going to be the users, that is a risk factor for us. It's common, but it's a risk factor. Business process. Okay, so is the business process well established and consistent? Is it consistent, but the AI system we're going to introduce will represent a significant change? For example, right now, people make all the decisions without any AI tool, and this will actually make a big difference because now they'll have this AI tool that they're supposed to listen to or might listen to. And a high risk would be to establish a whole standardized business process, because not only are they using tools, but everyone's doing things slightly differently. And so the purpose of the project is not just to improve it, but to also standardize an improvement. So you can see that'd be a clear risk. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. A decision support culture. Does the organization have a decision support culture? Are we going to be the first? Are they using decision support tools adjacent to what we're doing, or are they using it but just not adjacent to the decision that we're making? Decision scope. Is the decision that they're asking us to work on, is it well defined, or is it somewhat vague? The key performance indicators, so-called KPIs, are the main metrics that we're using to judge the success of the project. Are they around in a way, and is the data around that we can basically judge the new AI system, replay history, and say, this is clearly would have been better? That's awesome. Or the other extreme, do they not actually even have good KPIs for evaluating the decision itself? That's hence the italics, versus the outcome. There's a big difference between valuing the quality of a decision versus the outcome. The outcome can depend on exogenous factors, luck, other competitors, et cetera, whereas the quality of the decision is related, but not the same thing. The value proposition of this project. Typically, we're hired, they say, it's well understood this to be important. We don't exactly have an exact way of counting or measuring it, but it's very well understood. Sometimes, no, we can, the decision is such that you can be very, very specific and quantify the benefit. In the extreme example, sometimes the question is, we think this might be a good thing to do, but we're not sure how valuable it will be. and our full funding of this requires us to basically establish that. Resource availability, that's euphemistic for people. So does the sponsoring organization have people that are available for this project, or are we in competition with other initiatives? Similarly, are there other initiatives that seem to be overlapping, or are we all heading in the same direction? And finally, the users of our AI tool, are they directly under control of the organization, or are we looking to outside? For example, if we are optimizing for consumers, then that's a risk factor because we don't control them. If they're corporate users, say, then that at some level we can say, hey, they work for us. If we provide them a good tool and they don't want to use it, then we can, tell them, hey, that's a condition of employment here. You got to use this thing. So it's a risk factor when the users aren't actually under our control. So that quickly is the 10 environmental factors. I'm going to jump through the 10 technical factors. One is there an existing AI system that we're replacing? The second is this AI system, this optimization, is it novel, or do you see it off the shelf commonly in other places? A third is, does the project itself overall require new technologies? So it might not be that the AI or the optimization is requiring a brand new technology. It might, but it also may be dependent on some other technology. For example, it's reading certain kinds of sensors and using that as data. So the actual calculation may not require new technology, but it might be dependent on it. Conversely, it might be that the actual calculation is using groundbreaking solvers and technology. How is the decision scored? In pure play mathematical optimization, we might call this the objective function. There are other terms for it, but does the sponsoring organization have a way of scoring a win? Are the business rules well understood, or are they fuzzy? Do we feel that we have the correct data to make the decision with, or is that in doubt? Are we restricted by the types of software tools we're about to use, or does the project team have rights to pick whatever it thinks is necessary to do the job? Is speed of making the decision, is that a goal? So if we can make it faster, generally our stuff speeds decision-making time as one of its wins. Is that a bonus? And the user experience. So does the user experience, typically for us, the user experience is we are often not necessarily first generation, sometimes first generation, but usually when we come in, there will still be a human, quote, in the loop. So we are going to provide guidance for someone, say a planner, but they're still going to ultimately be held responsible for the quality of the decision. So yes, at the end game, sometimes you do have something that takes the human out of the loop and just says, this is going to just directly move it. But most of the projects that our firm has done, zero has been, there's a human in the loop. And finally, what's the process maturity of the overall organization that we're working with? Are they very happy and comfortable with advanced analytics, AI, optimization, operations research, whatever you want to call it? Do they have successful production deployments of our kinds of tools? Or is this kind of new territory for them? Some of our clients, this in fact is one of their hallmarks, is that they're very, very good with this stuff and they really know its value. And those make some of the best clients. So just as a quick buzz over, I know that was real fast. These are the 20 factors that we score every single one of our projects with. And I just want to end with a couple practicalities. First of all, we're not claiming that this is truth, in granite, but what we will be very confident saying is to have some consistent vocabulary and framework for communicating and discussing risk is very, very valuable. So even if this is largely applicable to Princeton Consultants and not to your organization, I believe that if you brought it to your organization and changed it to suit your organization, it would still be very, very valuable. So the value is less in the specifics, but more in the basic idea that we're going to have a framework and we're going to use this to basically score and communicate. Secondly is, well, technically speaking, if you think of these things as on off, risk not, and there's 20 of them, and there might be a colossal, maybe 2 to the 20th different combinations, or 3 to the 20th, depending on whether you think of it as 3 states. We often see very common patterns for risk. And I'll show you a couple when I close here. So on a project basis, this helps moving the planning conversations towards preventing problems up front, rather than just crossing our fingers and hoping for luck. We say this allows us to identify what we think the problems are going to be in this project and how are we going to address them up front. It also allows the project manager to focus on the root causes of problems rather than blaming individual practitioners. And our selfish view is it allows us to collect. This is a good organization for us for taking tips, tricks, tools, and put them in different bins. So I just want to give you, I mentioned there were some patterns. I started by mentioning 2 projects. So this is this large healthcare network. And to our eyes, recall red is risk, green is anti-risk, so green's good, red is risky, and blue is sort of neutral. So to our eyes, this says that the project risks are largely on the technical side. There are some on the environmental side, but they're really overwhelmed by a lot of green here too. So in this particular case, they are completely manual, but there is so much sponsorship and acknowledgement that if they could get this off of Excel and get this into solvers, that it's just worth a lot of money and a lot of other good things in healthcare for them. So there's a lot of environmental favor, but there are technical risks here. For example, do we actually know what a good and bad schedule really means? Or does everyone have a different opinion? Do we have the data or all the data necessary to do the scheduling captured on the computer, or these in some people's heads, etc. So this is an example of a scoring system that we use. Here is a project that we just did. And I'm going to have a couple slides on this, but this is the Edelman project, but you'll notice that it's the opposite. So there are some technical factors, but a lot of the risk is on the environmental side. And to give you an example of the environmental side, and I say this using only publicly available materials, this is from the 2010 census. So the census is done every 10 years. So this is the census done before the one we did. Okay, and on the left is this is from the manual for people who are going to go out in the field and do field collection of data. They note that the first census was done in 1790, and we've done 23 since then. And by God, they've all been great, and we've all done them. So there's a large view that we know how to do this. We've always done this. And one of the jobs they have is each person who's going to do this, there are hundreds of thousands of people that can do this. They're basically given a stack, a 3-ring binder. They're supposed to look through it, find addresses of people that need to be canvassed, pick out the ones they're going to do, and then hand route themselves through that. They have to figure out, given on the address, what census block they're in, and pick out a route. Okay, so this is the thing on the right is from the manual. Review the census block maps to plan an efficient route of travel for the addresses you plan to visit today. So they're being asked to do 2 things. One is select the addresses you're going to hit, and the second is route yourself through them. And you probably have to understand who's more likely to be available today. Are they working or are they retired? Which neighborhoods have traffic? Blah blah blah. So so for 2020. We used a computer. We gave everyone a smartphone and an algorithm, and I'm happy to say that we're a finalist for the Edelman Award with the Census Bureau, or more properly, the Census Bureau is the finalist, and they were nice enough to name us into the award submission. But this is the citation, and it basically saves the American public $2.4 billion, and is quite a win for our science. So I would argue that some of this is because going in, we correctly identified for them the real risks for this are on the business side. They really want us to come in and look at the math, and we did. But we spent a lot of time saying, from our don't shoot the messenger or shoot the messenger, but a lot of the risks coming on here are on the business side of it or on the environmental side. So we would like to say that AI deployment is both hard work and transformative outcomes, but you don't get it's not a magic pill. These are my two co-authors of this talk. So although I gave this, I'm not the sole author. I'd like to also acknowledge Irv Lustig and Patricia Randall, both ORs in PhDs in OR. And I just want to invite anyone on this call. We're always looking forward to talking to you guys and learning and sharing anything we know. So thanks. With that, I'll turn it back to Arnie, if I can figure out how to stop screen sharing, which I'm sure I will do. So Arnie, feel free to start asking questions or talking.
Sure. Okay, it's the little red button next to screen share, I think. Okay, so
is it still screen sharing? Oh, I see it. Great.
There we are. There we are.
Great.
Okay, that's fascinating introduction. Obviously, a really well thought out framework, and being a practitioner myself for close to 40 years, deployment is really everything. And so the fact that you guys have really structured and really thought hard about it is very impressive. As the next step of this webinar will be a few questions that I would like to pose to Steve. For all those online, please note that there's a Q&A section or icon at the bottom of the screen when you put your cursor on it, where you should add your questions, which we'll do in the last, say, roughly 15 minutes or so. So please enter them there, and we'll look through them as we reach that stage of the webinar. So first of all, Steve, it's a great pleasure to have this chance to have a chat with you today. We've known each other many years through Informs Roundtable and Informs in general. But as I mentioned earlier, there's more to say about your book. As I became a professor at the University of Maryland Smith School, I've employed your book as a required reading for my optimization course for MBA students. And of course, it is very focused on business perspective, the management perspective, as well as the underlying math of optimization, which is covered more in the outside of the book. But anyway, it's really important for MBAs to have that thinking. So my question is, I'd like to start our conversation by asking you to share with our listeners today your analytics journey, how you came to found Princeton Consultants, and what you see as its place in the analytics marketplace.
Well, thanks, Arnie. So thanks for your flattering comments too. I'll give a very short answer. I'm old enough to remember very vividly pre-internet. So I'll tell you what we didn't do. I didn't Google or do a search. And probably that was to my advantage. I often tell people now, you can search and find that any idea, any business that you want to do has already been done 5 times and give up. But I just didn't know. So what I thought, probably very incorrectly, but what I thought was the great consulting firms, and I thought there were only a handful, and there were in fact hundreds, maybe thousands, but I thought Bain, BCG, McKinsey, those kind of companies, they all looked the same to me. And it felt to me like they were very fabulous, and they had great staffs, but they were all built using very similar techniques, finance, HR, strategy type things. And I thought, what would it be like to create a consulting firm that used the same techniques that they were using in terms of, hey, we want to talk to business executives, not technical specialists, but we're using, our stuff. So, which has undergone in the 4 years I've been doing it many names, but AI, advanced analytics, optimization, data science, et cetera. So our place in this universe is that we have always been a small boutique pure play in this. Many of the large firms now have in our view have kind of swung over to doing what we're doing. But one thing that I think is notable is that in general, they very much align themselves by industry. So if you go to one of these great storied firms, from the outside, maybe it looks like one huge enterprise, but very quickly you're in some so-called practice area where it's like, okay, you're in the automotive practice area, or you're in the consumer products practice area, et cetera. And we still maintain a very old school view that the best consultants can and should migrate between different industries, because it's actually like a bee moving to different types of flowers. That's what gives them the best pollen, the best honey. So I think those are our two distinctive characteristics. One is we've always been a pure play in um, transformation with analytics, and second is that we remain generalists and not industry specialists.
Okay, interesting. So my second question is, many in the practitioner community struggle with the challenge of recruiting, training, mentoring, and supporting their highly skilled workforce. It is also critically important to students in our field and early career professionals to understand how employers think about new hires. Would you please share your approach to these challenges with our audience? In particular, do you usually hire or develop this talent internally, or is it a combination of both or something else?
Let me start with that second question and answer the first one too. So as I mentioned, when I started up, I was literally copying what I thought was the way consultants work, Bain, BCG, McKinsey. And like them, and this isn't the only way of building a consulting firm, I later found out, but like them, we would hire bright, high-powered people right out of school largely. So usually their first job, sometimes their second job, but that's the way we've done things the whole time. So we bring them in early, and then we bring them up through the system. We teach them, we put them on projects, et cetera, et cetera. Other consulting firms I later found, actually they take people that are in retirement or close to retirement, and they take very, very senior people and cluster them together and put them out in the field. And they say, hey, you're not going to pay for all these kids coming at you. We have just the senior, the so-called gray hairs are going to come at you. And I realized that's a very legitimate and very powerful way of consulting, but that's not how the way we go to market. We're much more like the large scale consulting firm. We say, you've got the senior directors, the Irv Lustigs, Patricia Randalls, you've got, people that are at a management level. They've been with the firm for 15 years. And then you may have people that are are super bright, have the gas turned up, and they've been here maybe for just a few years. But everyone in the firm is trying to basically move up and, and engage the client. Oh, I'm sorry. There were two parts. The first part was what kinds of people are successful? What are we looking for? I would have to say that probably anyone on this call is probably very gifted from a technical point of view. You're probably good in math. You're not afraid of computers or data. What we're looking for is that at an A level. We want someone who's really, really good at that. But we also want someone who's got high emotional intelligence, good communication skills, and has a reasonable personality. I think all of us know someone, maybe a roommate, a colleague, someone that's super bright, but you can't tell them anything. They're and maybe they're going to win a Nobel Prize, but they really are always convinced that they've got it right, and they're hard to get along with. Those kind of people make terrible consultants. So they might make fantastic scientists, arguably, but they don't make very good consultants. So what we don't want are people that are just, quote, nice people, get along with others. That is not sufficient. We want someone that are A players when it comes to being able to build models, but a lot of the deployment skills are empathy, communications, and just humbleness, learning. For example, when you see a journal article, the journal article is written in the language of the discipline. When you're in a corporate America, you can't communicate in our language. You have to communicate in their language. And that was one of the struggles of writing, and thank you, Arnie, the book, is I could explain optimization the way I would teach a student, but that's not what an executive wants to hear. They want to know, what is this thing and how does it work for me? They don't want to know, how do you calculate it? They want to know, what does it do for me? And so that's something that a good consultant has to be able to do, is be able to communicate a technical area persuasively to a business person.
Okay, great answer. Thanks. Very well stated. So your organization differs from the prior webinar speakers in this series in that you are an external consulting organization, not embedded in a large company. So what are the challenges, differences, success strategies that you use to operate in that environment?
That's a good question. So I want to say two things. One is best organizations you work, the biggest organization, they all have in-house departments. So one strategy is for us never to see ourselves in competition with them, and to let them know that we are working for them, not against them. For example, every large organization has both an in-house legal department, and they also use outside lawyers for specialty cases and so forth. So we want to be those outside lawyers, the outside consultants that are helped. What we don't want to be is people that come in from the outside and say, hey, your in-house people don't know what they're doing, and you need to have us come in. So we really want to be compatible with the in-house groups. The second thing, though, is most of the in-house groups, I would say, spend 95% of their time in their own four walls, as it were, within their enterprise, or at very least within their industry. And one of the things that we're able to do, because we see a lot of different clients, and like I said earlier, a lot of different industries, is we can bring a lot of techniques and a lot of stories from success and sometimes failure, to be honest, but from success in other organizations, but also other industries. And I think that's very helpful to help people cross-fertilize, particularly in some of the most important industries that are highly regulated. They also are often very slow moving, and often are just looking over their shoulder at what the other firm that is in their peer group are doing. That's why you're always hearing about disruption, because the disruptor is not one of your competitors suddenly getting superpowers and quashing you. It's some small company, some Silicon Valley startup or something that just comes and eats everyone's lunch. And sometimes being an outsider allows you to help a company say, how would someone from the outside, and we're from the outside, how would someone outside your industry see what you're doing right now? This seems an awful like what other people do in other industries, just not in yours. So those are the two things I would say. One is working with the in-house teams, and working for them. And the second is also using the advantage that we're outsiders, rather than trying to convince everyone, oh, no, we're subject matter experts here. It's like, no, we'll just use our outsider status to help actually cross-fertilize and bring new ideas in.
Great answer. And just a reminder to listeners, or to the audience, that we have the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and feel free to ask, as you're hearing Steve talk, enter any questions there. So continuing the theme of things that contrast to prior speakers in this series, I'd like to focus on the entrepreneurial aspect of your creating Princeton Consultants. What is different about developing a business from scratch? Did you have the fire in your belly to create and run your own business? Do smaller firms have any advantages?
I'll answer this question really quickly. I think people put a lot of premium on entrepreneurship, and often people flatter me with words like that. And I'm a survivor. Consulting was not a very smart business to pick. Yes, we've succeeded, but if someone was funding me, they shouldn't have, because it is a very long, slow climb. Consulting is almost completely based on track record. Whether you're a client wanting to hire a company, or whether you're a person that wants to join a company, you want to say, okay, what's your track record? And so a very sure of themselves, smart talking entrepreneur with no track record, both parties should be a little wary. But one of the advantages of starting from scratch and starting small is that you have very little to protect, and you have every interest in finding areas of value that people haven't exploited yet. So what I found was there was a massive gap between what I had learned in class as an undergraduate, simple stuff. Oh, here's the linear programming. Here's how you do here's the difference between an integer program and a linear program. And but when I went to business, I saw no one's using this hardly at all. Even places that you would, of course they're using it. The whole company is full of PhDs. Like, actually they're not. They're sitting in front of Excel, just doing this in their heads. I'm like, wow. So I thought that is a niche that we can expand into. So one of the nice things about starting small from scratch is that you really have to scramble. If you're opening a restaurant in a crowded town, you have to say, okay, I can't do another pizza joint or another sushi joint if there are 40 on the street. I've got to find something that is maybe it's a special kind of pizza, maybe it's a special kind of sushi, but it just can't be what everyone else is doing. They already have their customers, so I got to find a new customer. So I think that was a benefit.
Great answer. Okay. So it is a common challenge, both as an internal analytics group and when working as a consultant, to a large entity that you must cooperate. You sort of answered some of this, that you must cooperate with various groups within your client's organization, such as IT, marketing, financial services. As these groups are critical to success of analytics projects, how does Princeton Consultants approach these collaborative challenges? And do you have any interesting stories to share about how you did that?
I have a lot of interesting stories to show, and I love telling stories, but I think in the interest of time, I'll just say that a lot of the presentation was maybe not the answers, but the questions we asked to say, look at all the different aspects of this project, including the stakeholders, including existing initiatives they're running, and how do we fit into that and help ensure success. And I very much look forward to sharing our stories with our sponsoring client, the Census Bureau, about 2020, because I consider that a true hero's journey with a happy ending. And I think that, when my understanding is that the submission process includes, we have to put together a persuasive PowerPoint presentation and video. So if you guys don't mind waiting a couple months for that, I think that'll be a great story to experience, because it certainly was from the inside.
So at this point, in order to leave about 15 minutes or so for questions, I do have one last question, which I might ask as part of this
Sure.
I'm going to take a quick look at the questions. Feel free for those on the line to enter more questions. I hope you will. There's a couple of questions about would the slides be available, and I think the answer was yes. And why don't we just have the process that, first of all, there will be a video, but also if you'll contact Informs or me, or I guess your email address, Steve, is on the front slide, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Although it's probably better to go through channels, because I don't like to make promises I don't keep, but if someone sends me an email, it might go into my spam folder. So I think going through official Informs channels is probably the best. I mean, I would send out to anyone who asks, but sometimes if it's someone, it could just go into my spam folder. So, but we're very thrilled to share this with anyone that wants it.
So I'll work with the Inform staff to make sure there's a clear way on the website, to get access to the slides. Okay, so I do have a question from Daniel Falstra, someone I'm sure we both know.
Absolutely. Hey,
saying, could Steve say a few words about the size of projects where these methodology is applied, and in overall time or in person hours or dollars?
Yeah, so a classic project for us is, approximately 5 people, or full-time equivalent, or FTEs, we call it. And usually we break projects into like 6-month chunks. So back in the old days, IT projects were multi-year projects, and they got their hands slapped and realized, oh no, no one wants to pay for that. So they globally, they've adopted a system they call Agile, and that's a very helpful term. And we call our stuff Agile Analytics or Agile AI, and it really fits in with the IT initiatives. One thing that makes a firm our size somewhat unique is that the larger firms like to shovel people onto projects. They have a lot of mouths to feed. The academics, by the other extreme, tend to send like one super bright researcher onto a project. And so we're somewhere between those two extremes. So to us, a team of 5 or 10 is a really, really big, strong team, 5 FTEs.
Okay, here's another question. Dan has another one, which I'll come back to, but in this pandemic, this is from Ed Lee. In this pandemic, which project risk factors have you seen come to the forefront?
Oh, boy, that's a great question. 2020 and 2021 are different years. So speaking very selfishly, okay, in 2020, we had a lot of projects that the client had already gotten through the budget process, but when everyone left the corporate headquarters, things froze, and so that's very selfish. Okay, that was a real problem. But in 2021 and onward, one of our little secrets is that we spend a lot of time in the operational area. So if it's a white collar operation, say you have people on screens and they're doing some kind of planning thing and they have some IT system we're using, or maybe a prior model, we want to see them using it. we don't want to necessarily interview them on Skype or Zoom. We actually want to see them in their environment actually making the decision. And the problem is not only that are we not allowed on their site, they're not even on their site. They're distributed all over the place right now. So for many of our clients, many of our clients we work for years, we know them real well. But I think somewhat like our own company cultures, we're sort of skating on that on the momentum. And ultimately it slows down. So all the new people that come into the organization, if all you've ever met them is on Zoom, are you really building relationships? I know people at our firm, a lot of the people that we have had people that have retired, they've joined us as their first job, they've already retired. But we have people that were here 10 or 15 years ago, and they're still friends, really good friends, weekend friends with a lot of people in the firm. And I think that you build that because you're working together on projects, but you're seeing each other. That builds a lot of camaraderie, and that's true also on the client side. So I think one of the pandemic liabilities, the risk factors, is that we're not really getting the real story. We're getting the zoomed-ized version of the story, which tends to be very sanitized. And I just see that as a risk factor. Good question.
Yeah, great question. So I'm gonna read a question from a person that, again, both of us I know. Doug Samuelson. As a consulting firm grows, it is not immune to developing the same sorts of intellectual inertia that generate clients' needs for fresh points of view. Sometimes the new findings by a relatively new analyst get overridden by senior people in the consulting firm who, in quotes, know better what to tell the clients. How do you work to overcome this kind of inertia?
Well, what a great question. I don't have a glib answer for you, but let me give you and this may be self-congratulatory, and it very well be, but there are many organizations, many consulting organizations that are built on 3 tiers. We call them the finders, the minders, and the grinders. And the finders are selling, so they're finding. The minders are managing, and the grinders are doing what it sounds like they're putting in the 60, 70-hour weeks. In that world, the view is most of the knowledge are the minders, and the grinder's job is just to crank. So when a grinder, as your question suggests, they come in from a degree program with new knowledge, or they find something, they have to convince a minder that what they've got works. And if the minder is not of that ilk, they could just override them. And in particular, is that what the finder sold? Did the finder say, oh, we're going to put this AI machine learning thing, and it's going to go through your data, and it's going to come this great innovation? Well, maybe that's not where the value is. But by golly, that's what we sold, and by golly, that's what we're going to deliver, even if you can't make it work, or even if there's a much better thing. And that's just not how we go to market. We're much smaller teams, and I hope this isn't too self-congratulatory, but it's not a problem that we faced, I don't think. Some of our best ideas, we think, are the people that are actually interviewing the employees at our clients. They're actually doing the knowledge work right now. They're the ones that we write up all of our interviews, we discuss the interviews, but it's more like a focus group and less like a brain trust that says, we're going to come down and tell you how to do things. We're saying, what are we discovering? What are we hearing? So one of our classic questions, this is my last point, is we call it the magic wand question. So we'll ask someone who's doing knowledge work, if you had a magic wand, if you had a magic genie and it could do something for you, what would that do? Say, oh, well, here's one. It would just tell me how many people we're expecting to get next week. That would make my job really easy. Oh, sounds like a forecasting project. Okay, but so it's hard for us to shoot that down because it came from the field. It's not something that like some new hire thought up on their own. It's like, no, I'm just reporting what some of the organization is telling us. Great, but good question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So Dan asked several other good questions, so I'm going to shoot one of them in here. And I'm fascinated by this question as well. Do you endeavor to equip your clients to, in quotes, build the next analytics application themselves, end quote? And if so, what kind of person in the client organization is best equipped to do it themselves? And how does Princeton help?
Let me just give a concise answer. So what many of our clients are really great at is the discovery side of things. So they will have a handful of brilliant people, some long timers, some short timers, but they know their industry really well. They know their client really well. They know the data. They have good relationships. So they're good at digging out new proof of concepts. What most of our organizations, our client organizations, are weak at is actually getting those innovations into production. Notwithstanding, sometimes you'll be at a conference, or I'll be at a conference, and I'll see someone presenting, and we saved our organization zillions of dollars. And I think, in theory, if your stuff gets installed, but I happen to know, I don't bust them on this, but I happen to know it's still in the lab. It's not really, it's in one place. And so what we're always trying to help our clients do is that deployment. That was the focus of the book. That's the focus of this talk. So we certainly don't believe that, we should hold this stuff to ourselves. That's our secret sauce. If if it's, I have a prosperity view. There's a kind of a view that there's a finite amount of pie, and that we all have to grab our own. But I have a view of plenty. Is that if you can expand the pie. So as everyone now is talking about AI, let's get people really into AI that works. And the more that is happening, the more it's good for everyone on this call. I mean, we're not competitors. We're part of the vanguard. Suddenly, everyone's talking about our stuff. So optimization is AI, machine learning is AI, simulation is AI, but ultimately, if everyone's talking about, let's help them actually get it into results. Otherwise, it's going to have that Gartner crash where people say, oh, remember AI? Remember that old stuff? We've moved on to some other new buzzword. So AI is the real thing, but we've got to help make it, help make it work.
Okay, you also sort of answered the other question that Dan had asked in your answer there. So interesting. So I would like to first of all, the next question that I see on the list is from my good friend, and I think yours as well, Patricia Neary, about her question is about the technical factor of AI process maturity. Can you comment more about the mitigators for a business at the quote neutral level of risk?
Yeah, so a lot of process maturity can be simplified by saying, are they a winning team? Have they won a lot of games? And I have in my book a story of a young Jack Levis who's been a lifelong friend, and he was asked to take over the analytics group at UPS. And just the quick version of the story is he doesn't have or didn't have a background in operations research. He was a general purpose manager, but he was told this department in its heyday was fantastic. They were putting lots of scores on the board, everything from what kind of tires we should use to shortest path routing for people. But in the last 10 years, they haven't done anything that we can see that adds to the bottom line. They've grown their department. They present at conferences. They do white papers, but they haven't put money in the pocket. So the first thing is lower your scope, but get a lot of wins on the board. And I think that's the number one thing that analytics maturity about is, can you win games? Can you install things? And maybe you should be less reaching for the stars and more just finding very concrete things that can go in and you get credit for it. So yes, you install it, but also you get your sponsors to agree. Okay, and I will, be part of your PR effort because I know that you guys need to popularize that what you're doing is the good stuff for our company.
Okay, great, thank you. So as we're getting close to the end of our hour, I'm going to ask the last question, the one I didn't ask earlier, and hopefully it can be the sort of end of our discussion. What does the future look like for analytics at Princeton Consultants?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me give a very concise answer. Okay, I think that AI is not a passing phase or buzzword. Now we might be calling it something slightly different, but that we are at the beginning of, now it is our turn. So if I look back over my corporate history, there have been many different theories of how to grow business. One was through finance, the other was through HR. And it's not like money's not important or people are important, but for the first time, really, what people are calling AI, so smart algorithms on smart data, building models. Suddenly people are saying, maybe this is the key to unlearn. Maybe this is the difference between Uber and a taxi company. So maybe this is what we should all be doing. And if you don't do it, maybe you're going to be left behind. I'd like to think that our future, as well as the people on this phone, is that we are going to be now in the spotlight, and people are going to say, okay, you asked for the funding, you asked for the game ball. Here it is. Here's the game ball. Now run it. Show us that you can score on this and that you can lead the way. And I really look forward to that. I think our field will be expanding. It'll be harder and harder for us to turn down requests for our work, and we'll just have to be more discerning about signing up for projects, not just because, oh, wow, I'm happy to be hired by anyone, but it's like, I need to work on projects that clearly have all the success factors lined up, and so that I can succeed, with and for my client. But thanks, Arnie. Really appreciate this opportunity, and although I can't see people on the call, I really thank everyone for spending an hour with me, and I'll look forward to talking anytime I can.
Okay, so this was great. Thank you again for your willingness to speak. It was really a great webinar. I took a quick look at the participant list. We had the president of Informs, Radical Kulkarni, on the call, and many other really outstanding practitioners that I've known over many years. So thank you all for joining, and look forward to the next time. Thank you very much. Take care.